The heart monitor flatlined at 3:12 a.m. 4 minutes. That's how long Marcus Webb was clinically dead. 4 minutes of nothing. No heartbeat, no brain activity, no signs of life. And when the team finally brought him back, when his eyes snapped open and he grabbed the arm of the nurse closest to him, he said 7 words that made her blood run cold. 7 words that were absolutely impossible for him to know. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because to understand why those 7 words changed everything, you need to know what happened in the 43 hours before Marcus Webb's heart stopped beating. And trust me, what happened in those 43 hours is something I still think about late at night. St. Augustine Medical Centre sits on the corner of Mercy and 14th, in the kind of neighbourhood where gunshot wounds and overdoses keep the trauma bays full most weekends. It's a level 1 trauma centre, which means when the helicopters fly in with the worst of the worst, this is where they land. The building itself is old, built in 1962, renovated twice, held together by duct tape and prayers according to the maintenance staff. But the people inside, some of the best in the business. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been the attending physician in the emergency department for 11 years. She'd seen things that would make most people question their faith in humanity, and she'd also seen miracles that would restore it. At 47, she had grey streaking through her dark hair, and the kind of calm that only comes from watching 1,000 emergencies unfold. Nothing rattled her. Nothing surprised her anymore. Or so she thought. It was a Thursday evening in late October when Marcus Webb walked through the automatic doors of the emergency department. Not rolled in on a stretcher, not carried by paramedics. He walked in on his own 2 feet, which is the first detail that would later keep Dr. Vasquez up at night. Because a man with what was happening inside his chest should not have been able to walk anywhere. Marcus was 38 years old, a high school basketball coach with the kind of build you'd expect. Tall, broad-shouldered, the type of guy who still played pickup games with his students on Fridays. He'd been experiencing what he described as weird pressure in his chest for about 3 days. His wife had finally convinced him to get it checked out. Probably just heartburn, he told the triage nurse, a woman named Patricia Chen, who'd been doing this job for 23 years. My wife worries too much. Patricia smiled the way triage nurses do when they've heard that exact sentence 1,000 times, usually from men who were about to find out their wives were right to worry. She took his vitals. Blood pressure, 142/94, slightly elevated. Heart rate, 98, a little fast for a resting athlete. Oxygen saturation, 96%, normal. Temperature, 98.8, barely worth noting. But it was his EKG that made Patricia's hands go still. She'd been doing this job long enough to read an EKG without thinking, and what she saw on that 12 lead made her pick up the phone and call for Dr. Vasquez immediately. "We've got a STEMI in triage," she said quietly. "Walking and talking. Get cardiology down here now." For those of you who don't speak hospital, a STEMI is an ST elevation myocardial infarction. In plain English, a massive heart attack. The kind where a major artery is completely blocked and heart muscle is dying by the minute. The kind that kills people in their driveways, in their offices, in their sleep. Marcus Webb was having a massive heart attack, and he was sitting in the waiting room, scrolling through his phone, texting his wife that the wait wasn't too bad. Dr. Vasquez took one look at the EKG, and her face went pale. "How long has he been symptomatic?" "He says 3 days," Patricia answered. 3 days. Dr. Vasquez would later describe this to colleagues as medically impossible. A STEMI of this severity should have killed him within hours. The fact that Marcus Webb was alive, let alone conscious and coherent, defied everything she knew about cardiac medicine. But the mystery of why he was still alive would have to wait. Because if they didn't get him to the cath lab in the next few minutes, the mystery would become moot. What happened next was controlled chaos. The kind of organised pandemonium that hospitals do better than anywhere else on Earth. Marcus was on a gurney in seconds. 1 V-lines were placed while he was still moving. The cath lab was alerted, and Dr. Raymond Park, the interventional cardiologist on call, was already scrubbing in when they burst through the doors. "What are we looking at?" Dr. Park asked, without looking up from the imaging screen. "Widowmaker," Dr. Vasquez said. "Complete occlusion of the LAD. 3 days symptomatic, but somehow still with us." Dr. Park paused for just a moment. A rare thing for a man who'd performed over 2,000 cardiac catheterizations. The LAD, or left anterior descending artery, supplies blood to the largest part of the heart. A complete blockage there is called a widowmaker for a reason. It kills fast, and it kills completely. 3 days, he said. That's not possible. And yet, here we are. Marcus, to his credit, had finally realised something was seriously wrong. The calm facade was cracking. "Doc," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Am I going to die?" Dr. Park looked at him with the kind of steady honesty that separates good doctors from great ones. "Not if I can help it, but I need you to stay very still for me, okay? We're going to fix this." What Dr. Park didn't say, what he couldn't say, was that the imaging he was looking at showed something he'd never seen before. The blockage in Marcus's LAD wasn't just bad, it was catastrophic. But somehow, impossibly, the heart muscle downstream was still functioning. It was as if Marcus's body had found some way to survive that medical science couldn't explain. The procedure took nearly 2 hours. Dr. Park placed 3 stents, reopening the artery and restoring blood flow. By the time Marcus was wheeled into the cardiac ICU, his heart was beating with the steady rhythm of a man who'd just been given a second chance at life. But here's the thing about second chances. Sometimes they come with conditions you don't expect. Marcus's wife Denise arrived around midnight. She was a small woman with kind eyes and the exhausted look of someone who'd driven 2 hours in the dark after getting a phone call no spouse ever wants to receive. Dr. Vasquez met her in the family waiting room. "Is he going to be okay?" Denise asked, clutching her purse like it was the only thing keeping her anchored to the floor. "He's stable," Dr. Vasquez said carefully. "The procedure went well, but I have to be honest with you. What happened to your husband is extremely unusual. His heart should have failed days ago. We're still trying to understand why it didn't." Denise nodded, but the words didn't seem to register. She just wanted to see her husband. Dr. Vasquez led her to the ICU, where Marcus was sleeping peacefully, his vital signs stable on the monitors overhead. For the next 16 hours, everything went exactly according to protocol. Marcus woke up, complained about the hospital food, and asked when he could go home. The nurses charted his vitals every hour. The cardiologist reviewed his imaging. Everyone agreed that he was an extraordinary case. A medical mystery, maybe, but a success story nonetheless. And then, at 3:07 a.m. on Saturday morning, everything changed. The nurse on duty was named Sarah Kim. She was 29, had been an ICU nurse for 6 years, and had seen more codes than she could count. But what happened that night would haunt her for the rest of her career. She heard the alarm first, that distinctive tone that means something has gone critically wrong. By the time she reached Marcus's bedside, his eyes were rolled back, his body was seizing, and his heart monitor was showing a rhythm she'd never seen outside of textbooks. Ventricular fibrillation. His heart wasn't beating. It was quivering uselessly, unable to pump blood. Without intervention, he had, maybe, 4 minutes before irreversible brain damage set in. maybe 6 before death became inevitable. "Code Blue, cardiac ICU," Sarah's voice echoed through the unit. "I need the crash cart, now!" What followed was 4 minutes of the most intense medicine you can practice. Chest compressions at 100 beats per minute. Defibrillator paddles charged to 200 joules, then 300, then 360. Epinephrine pushed through the IV line. Amiodarone to stabilize the rhythm. Every intervention in the ACLS protocol performed with the precision of people who do this every day and the desperation of people who know this patient was supposed to live. Dr. Vasquez had been called from the break room where she'd been catching a few hours of sleep. She arrived in time to see Marcus's body jerk with the third shock, his back arching off the bed as 360 joules of electricity coursed through his chest. Nothing. Flatline. 4 minutes and counting. "Push another round of epi," Dr. Vasquez ordered, her voice steady despite what she was seeing. "And prepare for asystole protocol." Sarah was doing chest compressions, counting in her head the way they'd taught her in training. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 30 compressions, 2 breaths. Repeat. Her arms were burning. Someone stepped in to relieve her. 3 minutes and 40 seconds of CPR. No pulse, no rhythm. The defibrillator was useless on a flatline. There was nothing to shock. They were pumping medications into a body that refused to respond. At the 4-minute mark, Dr. Vasquez was about to make the call that no doctor ever wants to make. She was about to look at the clock and announce a time of death. And that's when Marcus Webb came back. Now, before I tell you what happened next, and trust me, what happened next is the reason I'm telling you this story, I want to say something. If you're the kind of person who finds yourself completely absorbed in stories like this, the kind where life and death hang in the balance and you genuinely don't know what's coming next, then you should probably subscribe to this channel. I put out new stories every single day, and they only get more intense from here. All right, let me tell you what Marcus said when he came back. His eyes opened, not slowly, not groggily, but all at once like someone had flipped a switch. His hand shot out and grabbed Sarah Kim's forearm with a grip so tight she later said it left bruises. His mouth opened, and he spoke 7 words in a voice that didn't sound entirely like his own. "Sarah, your grandmother says to forgive him." Sarah Kim went absolutely still. The colour drained from her face so completely that Dr. Vasquez thought for a moment she might need to code her next. "What did you just say?" Sarah whispered. But Marcus didn't repeat himself. His grip loosened, his eyes fluttered, and he slipped back into unconsciousness. Not the unconsciousness of death, but the deep sleep of a body that had just been through an unimaginable trauma. His heart was beating. His vitals were stabilizing. By every medical measure, Marcus Webb had just experienced a miraculous recovery. But no one in that room was thinking about medicine anymore. "What the hell was that?" one of the residents asked. Dr. Vasquez shook her head. "Hypoxic confusion. The brain does strange things when it's been without oxygen. He's probably mixing up memories, generating random neural activity." It was a perfectly reasonable medical explanation. It made complete sense. It also didn't explain why Sarah Kim had just fled the room in tears. Dr. Vasquez found her in the break room 10 minutes later. Sarah was sitting on the worn couch in the corner, her hands trembling as she tried to drink a cup of water. "Sarah, talk to me. What happened in there?" Sarah looked up with red-rimmed eyes. "He couldn't have known that. There's no way he could have known that." "Known what?" Sarah took a shaky breath. "My grandmother raised me. She died 8 months ago. Lung cancer. I was holding her hand when she passed." She paused, wiping her eyes. Right before she died, she told me I needed to forgive my father. He left when I was 4. I've never even met him. I never talk about it. I've never told anyone at work. Never told anyone at all, except my therapist. Dr. Vasquez felt a chill run down her spine. Maybe you mentioned it once, in passing, and Marcus happened to... No, Sarah's voice was firm. I've never spoken to Marcus Webb before tonight. He came in while I was on my days off. The first time I saw him was when I walked into his room to start my shift. And those words, forgive him, those were the exact words my grandmother used. Exact. Not forgive your father, not let go of your anger. She said forgive him, just like that. Dr. Vasquez was a woman of science. She believed in evidence, in data, in the beautiful complexity of the human body that could be understood through careful study. She did not believe in ghosts or messages from beyond or any of the supernatural explanations that might account for what had just happened. But she also couldn't explain it. Over the next several hours, as Marcus remained stable and unconscious, Dr. Vasquez did something she'd never done before. She started asking questions that had nothing to do with medicine. She learned that Marcus had no connection to Sarah's family, different neighborhoods, different schools, different social circles. He'd never met her grandmother. He'd never been to the church where the funeral was held. There was no logical way he could have known about Sarah's father, or her grandmother's last words, or the years of complicated grief that Sarah carried with her every day. When Marcus finally woke up, really woke up, not the terrifying flash of consciousness from before, it was almost noon on Saturday. Denise was there, holding his hand, looking at him like she'd never seen anything so precious. "Hey," he said weakly, "what'd I miss?" Dr. Vasquez was there within minutes. She needed to know what he remembered. "Marcus, I need to ask you some questions about what happened last night. During the code, when we brought you back, do you remember anything?" Marcus frowned, the effort of thinking clearly visible on his face. I remember pain in my chest, and then nothing. It was like someone turned off the lights." "That's all? Nothing else?" He paused, his eyes going distant. "There was something, I think. It felt like a dream, but not like any dream I've ever had. I was somewhere dark. Not scary dark, just quiet, like the space between thoughts." "Go on." "And there was a woman there. Old. Kind face. She was wearing this blue dress with little flowers on it. She told me I needed to deliver a message." Sarah had appeared in the doorway. Dr. Vasquez didn't tell her to leave. "What kind of message?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "I don't remember exactly. Something about forgiveness. She said there was someone in the room who needed to hear it, that it had been weighing on her since she passed, and this was her only chance." Marcus looked at Dr. Vasquez with genuine confusion. "Does that mean anything to you?" "It feels important, but I don't know why." Sarah stepped fully into the room. "The dress," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The blue dress with little flowers. What kind of flowers?" Marcus closed his eyes, concentrating. "Violets, I think. Purple violets." Sarah made a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "My grandmother was buried in that dress. I picked it out myself." There are moments in medicine, rare moments, when everything you think you know gets turned upside down. When the careful scaffolding of science and reason shakes just enough to let something else peek through. Dr. Vasquez had always dismissed these moments as coincidence, or misremembered details, or the brain's remarkable ability to create connections that aren't really there. But this time, she couldn't dismiss it. The details were too specific. The circumstances were too precise. Something had happened in those 4 minutes when Marcus Webb was clinically dead, and it had nothing to do with medicine. What happened next is the part of this story that stuck with me the most. Because it would have been easy, maybe even
expected, for everyone to move on. Marcus recovered fully. His heart healed better than anyone anticipated. Within 2 weeks, he was walking 3 miles a day and planning his return to coaching. Sarah could have chalked up what happened to trauma and exhaustion and the strange things the mind does when it's desperate for meaning. But she didn't. 3 days before Marcus was discharged, Sarah asked if she could speak with him privately. They sat together in the small garden on the hospital's 4th floor, surrounded by carefully maintained flowers and the distant sound of traffic. "I want to thank you," she said. "I know you didn't ask for any of this. I know it probably freaked you out as much as it freaked me out." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about it every day, trying to understand it. I'm not a religious person. I never believed in any of this stuff. But I can't deny what I felt, what I saw." "I called my father," Sarah said, "for the first time in 25 years. He lives in Seattle now, has a whole other family. When I heard his voice..." She trailed off, struggling for words. "I always imagined I'd be angry, that the first thing I'd do was tell him off for everything he missed, every birthday, every graduation, every moment he should have been there." "What did you say?" "I said, 'I forgive you.'" Sarah smiled, tears streaming down her face, but there was no sadness in her expression, only relief. "And I meant it." They sat in silence for a long time after that. 2 strangers who'd been thrown together by circumstances neither of them could explain, connected by something that defied everything they thought they knew about how the world worked. Marcus went home on a Tuesday. Denise drove because she wasn't about to let him behind the wheel for at least another month. As they pulled out of the hospital parking lot, Marcus looked back at the building one last time. "Something happened in there," he said quietly. "Something I'm never going to be able to explain." Denise reached over and squeezed his hand. "I know, and I think that's okay." Dr. Vasquez submitted her report on Marcus's case to the cardiology department. She stuck to the facts: the widowmaker, the successful stent placement, the unexpected cardiac arrest, the successful resuscitation. She did not include what Marcus said when he woke up. She did not include the blue dress with purple violets. But she kept her own notes, handwritten, in a journal she'd started years ago for cases that didn't fit neatly into medical textbooks. This case got more pages than any other. Sarah visited her grandmother's grave the following weekend. She hadn't been since the funeral. The grief had been too fresh, the wounds too raw. But now she knelt on the soft grass and told her grandmother everything. About the code, about Marcus, about the message that had somehow crossed a boundary that wasn't supposed to exist. "I forgave him, Grandma," she whispered. "Just like you asked. I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if what happened was really you, or if it was something else entirely. But if it was you, thank you for not giving up on me." I've thought about this story a lot since I first heard it, about the boundary between life and death, and what might exist in those 4 minutes when the monitors flatline and the brain goes dark. About whether there's something on the other side, some place where the people we've lost are still reaching out, still trying to connect, still waiting to deliver the messages they never got to say. I don't know the answer. I don't think anyone does. What I do know is that Marcus Webb returned to coaching 2 months after he left St. Augustine Medical Center. His cardiologist said his recovery was remarkable, not quite miraculous, but close. He takes his medication every day, walks 5 miles every morning before school, and has started going to church with Denise on Sundays.
He says he doesn't know exactly what he believes, but he knows he believes in something. Sarah Kim kept working in the cardiac ICU. She says the job feels different now, less like a series of emergencies and more like a series of opportunities. Every patient who comes through those doors might be carrying a message that someone else needs to hear. Every code might be more than just a fight for survival. She's met with her father 3 times now. They're not close, not yet, but they're trying, and that's more than she ever thought possible. Dr. Vasquez retired from the emergency department last year. She teaches now, training the next generation of physicians at the medical school across the street. She tells them about evidence-based medicine and the importance of clinical reasoning and all the things that make good doctors great. But sometimes, at the end of a particularly difficult lecture, she tells them about Marcus Webb, about the 4 minutes and the impossible words and the blue dress with purple violets. She tells them that medicine is science, but humanity is something more. And sometimes, if you're paying attention, you'll witness things that your training can't explain. Keep your minds open, she tells them, because in 30 years of medicine, the cases that have taught me the most are the ones I still can't understand. There's a plaque now in the cardiac ICU at St. Augustine Medical Centre. It's small, easy to miss if you're not looking for it. It reads, "In memory of those who crossed over and the messages they left behind." Sarah had it made. She paid for it herself, and every shift, when she walks past it, she thinks about a woman in a blue dress with purple violets who loved her enough to find a way back, if only for a moment. Some things in medicine can be explained. Some things in medicine defy explanation, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, you're standing in the room when the boundary between them disappears entirely. Stories like this one happen more often than you'd think. Doctors and nurses have them, patients carry them for the rest of their lives. And sometimes, when you least expect it, you find yourself in the middle of one. Tomorrow, I've got a story about a night shift ER nurse who noticed something in a patient's blood work that 3 doctors had missed. What she discovered almost got her fired, but it also exposed something the hospital had been hiding for years. If you want to hear that one, make sure you're subscribed. And if you've ever witnessed something in a hospital that you couldn't explain, something that still gives you chills when you think about it, I want to hear about it. Drop it in the comments. These stories deserve to be told. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.